I went to visit my dad not too long ago. We have a good relationship, we just don't talk all that much. His health is starting to decline. He was a little wistful. We're just each having a beer, not saying much, when he says he has something he needs to tell me. You're old enough, you may as well know. I didn't know what he was talking about, so I asked him. Remember that time I got home from work real upset and I wouldn't tell you what happened? I did remember. It wasn't something I would ever forget. He wasn't just upset, he was scared of something. I'd never seen Dad scared in my life until then. He was the kinda guy whose bar fights are town legends. I also remember he told me to never ask him about it, so I never did. What he told me disturbed me profoundly. I've been bothered by it ever since. I hope writing it out will help me deal. First, a little background. First incident. When I was really young, like 4 or 5, my dad and I lived in a cheap apartment building on the ground floor. I don't remember much about it. I know I didn't like it there. The kids weren't nice to play with. They'd steal my toys. And it was just a grimy area. But we were having tough times and it's what he could afford. Probably what I remember most about the place was how I would get woken up from sleep every once in a while by flashing lights. I don't remember being too worried about it at first. I just assumed there was lots of lightning in that area. I was 5. I didn't know jack about meteorology. One night, my dad had my uncle and his wife over for a crab leg dinner. I remember it distinctly because it was the first time I'd ever eaten crab. While they were talking, I just casually mentioned the lightning last night. Dad said, "There wasn't no lightning last night." I thought he was just clowning around, so I laughed and told him how the flashing lights woke me up. He and my uncle got serious. That freaked me out. Because they were always silly when they got together. They asked me more questions about the lights, nothing I recall exactly, but they decided I was probably seeing headlights from cars driving by, shining on the curtains. I guess I believed them. But after that, I'd always get nervous when the flashing lights would wake me up. Because I knew it wasn't lightning anymore. A few times I called for Dad when it happened, but when he'd get to my room there was nothing to see. He started telling me it was all in my head. We moved out of that apartment after a year or so when Dad's handyman business picked up. The flashing stopped when we left, so I came to believe it was a combination of passing cars and my imagination. It wasn't something I ever gave much thought to again until recently. Second incident. One time I was helping my dad out on a job. This was a bigger job, kinda rebuilding a whole house, so he had a few other guys working with us. Some of them I knew and some I'd never seen before. I was used to it. It's what he always did on bigger jobs. I was sitting off on my own eating my lunch and listening to my CD Walkman. Dad generally didn't eat lunch, he'd just get too into the work. So he was still busy on site. Suddenly I notice a guy walking toward me from the general direction of the site. I didn't remember seeing this guy before. But he was making a beeline straight for me. He was an oldish guy. His head was shaved, and he was wearing a Ramones t-shirt. He sat down beside me, way too close, and didn't say a word. I took off my headphones, because I didn't want to be rude, and said, "Hi." He told me my dad was looking for me and I should get heading back as soon as I'd finished my sandwich. That was the plan anyway, but I said that was fine. To make things less awkward, I said I liked the Ramones. He didn't seem to even know who they were. After sitting with me for a few moments longer, while I ate my sandwich uncomfortably, he got up and started walking away. I was relieved. I started to put the headphones back on when he stopped suddenly. I don't know why, but it freaked me out. I froze. He turned around and fixed me with the most hateful stare I'd ever seen. I didn't know what it felt like to be hated until then. It was like he wanted me dead. I remember thinking what I should do when he attacks me. But he didn't attack. He just shouted, "Someone's been sleeping in your bed and I don't like it." He stalked off, leaving me puzzled and terrified. It was probably 85 degrees out, but I was shivering. I put the rest of my sandwich away and went back to work. I asked my dad who that guy was a little later. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. I described the guy. Dad said nobody like that even worked on the site. At the time, I figured it was just some weird drunk. But now it has a whole new meaning. Things I didn't catch before stand out. Like, my sandwich was still in my box when that guy talked to me. How'd he know what I brought for lunch? Dad's story. When I was 15, Dad was called out on a job some house way on the other side of the bay. In the town I grew up in, you have two sides. One side of the bay has all the beaches and the mall, the other side has downtown and lots of woods. The old apartment was on the beachy side. The house he was called to was a quarter of the way to the next town on the woodsy side. So he shows up in his van with all his tools. The front yard is really overgrown. No vehicles in the driveway, except a rusting husk of what used to be a 70s model Chevy. The house is in pretty bad shape. But he went up to the front door. Before he could knock, he saw a note telling him to come right in and they'd be back soon. He didn't like going into someone's home without them there, because he didn't want to be accused of anything. But he'd driven far, so he went ahead. He got to work on repairing some wood rot around the window frames. He'd been there for nearly an hour when he thought he heard someone. He went to check. There was still no car in the driveway, except for his van. "Hello?" he called. He heard what sounded like a door slam. Dad was not the kind of guy to get nervous. He was a local legend for his bar fights. But he told me he was starting to get creeped out. And that just pissed him off. So he started stomping around the house. He saw the back door was wide open leading into the overgrown backyard. He wondered if it was just the wind moving the door. He closed it and was going back into work, when he decided to just look the place over. Just in case. He looks around downstairs. There's nothing much to see. The house is in bad shape, but it's furnished. The place is kept fairly clean and tidy. The electricity still works. Someone's definitely living there, just not able to keep the place up. He's pretty much satisfied his concerns, but he goes upstairs to look around anyway. Upstairs is much the same as down. Clean and tidy, just in need of repairs. Something doesn't feel right about the place to him. Dad's never been much of an intuitive kind of guy, so those must be some bad vibes. The last room at the end of the upstairs hall is closed. It's the only door that was closed. It's jammed in the frame somehow, but he gets it open. It's just a bedroom. All painted yellow with yellow furniture. He spots some wood rot around the window frames upstairs, too. He was told there'd only be 3 windows to do and this one made 4. But he checks it out. When he does, the sill just lifts right off and there are papers and things stuffed between the walls. He's seen it all. It doesn't surprise him. He pulls the papers out because he plans to go ahead and do this window, too, 'cause he's like that. He wouldn't ask for more money. He just wanted the whole job done. When he pulls the papers out, he sees it's mostly photographs. Dad's big on privacy. He just happened to see the photographs and he knew he was looking at something bad. He started flipping through them. They were all pretty much the same. The back of each picture is dated. But every one of them was a picture of a little boy sleeping. Dad recognized me and that ground floor bedroom right away. He remembered my stories about the flashing lights. It hadn't been in my head at all. Someone had been taking pictures of me sleep for almost a year. He told me there weren't any pictures of other boys either. Whoever took the photos was only taking pictures of me. He called the police, of course. The listed owner for the house was an elderly couple living in Vancouver. They used to summer in the home, but just hadn't gotten around to it in years. They didn't even notice they were still paying the electric bill. They had no idea about the pictures or hiring my dad. It was a dead end. I had so many questions after he told me this. For one, why would someone who was so far away from our apartment drive a 30-minute drive at night to take pictures of just me? How'd they even know me? How'd they fixate on that one apartment or kid? And why call my dad out to find the stash of pictures after a decade of leaving us alone? Dad actually had an answer for one of those questions. In a way, I find this creepier. Turns out he went out to the wrong address. He wrote it down wrong. When police checked his answering machine tape for clues, he was actually called to a much closer home by a completely innocent guy. He stumbled on this house and stash of pictures completely by a random misunderstanding. So who left the note on the front door?